All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you are not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page, or tune in to 900 AM or 96.1 FM WURD. We will begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. All of our hearts are heavy today. Philadelphia grieves with the people of Uvalde, Texas, and all the families hurting today. Yesterday's news was devastating, and the loss of so many precious young lives is just unimaginable. To all the families hurting in ways that I can't even begin to describe or imagine, Philadelphians offer our sincere support and deepest condolences. But condolences are not all we as people, as citizens, can offer. Today and every day, I think of the people who lose their lives to gun violence in Texas, here in Philadelphia, and all over the United States. Yesterday's tragedy comes less than 2 weeks after the mass shooting in Buffalo. Every single act of violence with a gun, the street corner argument that ends in gunfire, the mass shooting in an elementary school, the hate-filled killings in spaces of everyday life like a grocery store and houses of worship, each is a statement of policy failure for this nation. Every person should be outraged and distraught that we accept these tragedies as unavoidable instead of making them impossible through legislation and policy change. We cannot accept continued violence as a way of life in our country. This reality is unacceptable, but it can and will change if we work together. The mass shootings are horrific and garner the attention of the nation to find solutions to this crisis. But every day in this country, including here in Philadelphia, people are senselessly killed because of easy access to guns. I've said it once, I'll keep on saying it. Hopefully I won't have to say it forever. When will enough be enough for elected officials in Harrisburg and Washington to do something about this? Or at the very least, stop preventing us from regulating guns in our own communities. You know, I honestly believe that the founding fathers of this country had in mind a single shot muzzle loaded long rifle that was hung over your fireplace in order to fight the British. I don't think they had any idea about yesterday and the other mass shootings that have happened in this country, nor would they have condoned it, nor they would have written an amendment to the Constitution to allow it to happen. And as we mourn the loss of so many lives in Texas, I also want to take this moment to acknowledge that today, 2 years ago, a man who should be still alive today is not. George Floyd's murder crystallized for everyone the very real, deep, and pervasive impacts of systemic racism across all facets of our society, permeating into our lives in ways seen and unseen with its toxic effects. George Floyd should be alive with his family today. Now it's incumbent on all of us to keep his memory alive and ensure his death was not in vain. His death represented the countless Black Americans tragically killed by police, and it catalyzed a long overdue reckoning about systemic racism in this country. We continue to urge all Philadelphians to reflect on the tremendous legacy Mr. Floyd leaves behind and on how we can continue to work together to enact police reform and dismantle institutional racism. Here in Philadelphia, the city has worked together with institutions, departments, community leaders, and organizations to enact meaningful reforms, reimagine public safety, and advance racial justice, and this critical work continues. Since we created the Pathways to Reform, Transformation, and Reconciliation in 2020, we continue to institute reforms that aim to make city policies racially equitable, fair, and transparent. Among the policies we've worked to expand or implement, we've embedded DBH IDS staff to support 911 call operators in identifying signs of behavioral health crises. We provided behavioral health screening questions for 911 call operators. We launched our co-responder model with crisis intervention response teams. We've expanded crisis intervention CIT training for officers, and we are strengthening our alternative responders and our behavioral health crisis response. We're also working on racial equity action plans to ensure that every city department actively works to reverse the past harms that governments have perpetuated and to improve equity through their budget, procurement, and core service programs. This work is critical to reduce racial disparities across many indicators for success: education, criminal justice, jobs, housing, health, and more. The Pathways to Reform is an ongoing process. The city continues to review meaningful symbols like public holidays, art, landmarks, and monuments, since some of them represent systemic oppression, bigotry, and the legacies of racial inequality for communities of color. Make no mistake, we can and will do better in addressing our city's inequities. We will continue to do everything in our power to build up our city and our people, all of us. I also want to highlight that June is National Gun Violence Awareness Month. And this month we'll be sharing early details of a new campaign to showcase how gun violence is not just a public safety issue, but a public health crisis. Dr. withPHA will share more momentarily. This effort is made all the more critical, especially in light of the horrific shootings that took the lives of 5 people this past weekend here in Philadelphia. And in addition to June being National Gun Violence Awareness Month, I want everyone to know that June 3rd through 5th this year is Wear Orange Weekend. The Wear Orange movement started in 2013 in Chicago when Hydea Pendleton, a high school student, was shot and killed in a playground just days after marching in President Obama's second inaugural parade. To honor her and all the countless lives lost in Philadelphia across the country to senseless gun violence, mark your calendars and show your support by wearing orange on June 3rd. Finally, today, we'll also highlight a new partnership between the city and the Philadelphia Housing Authority that will expand efforts to expand supports for people who are highly at risk of engaging in gun violence. This program, focused in the areas most impacted by violence, is a critical new strategy in the ongoing implementation of the roadmap for safer communities to meet those at risk where they are and to get them the help that they need to choose a different path. More details will be shared by Erica Atwood and Kelvin Jeremiah, President and CEO of withPHA, who we're pleased to have joined us this afternoon. And another somber note, I want to extend my condolences to the family and loved ones of police officer Thomas Muns Jr., who was tragically killed while off duty in a vehicle crash in South Philadelphia last night. PPD is continuing to investigate this tragic incident. We will share more information as it becomes available. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. withPHA, Injury Prevention Program Manager, Philadelphia Department of Public Health. Dr. Ruth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. The Philadelphia Department of Public Health wanted to make mention today of a new social media campaign called We Can, We Will, which we hope to launch in early June. As many of you know, and as the mayor just mentioned, June is when we recognize Gun Violence Awareness Day, stopping to recognize the impact of gun violence on our lives, on the lives of our families, our neighbors, and our friends. Our hearts are broken for lives lost and forever changed by violence. The first weekend in June, many of us will be wearing orange in solidarity with advocates throughout the country as part of Wear Orange Weekend. This health department campaign was built in conversation with our community partners who, despite the challenge of confronting gun violence, have asked time and again what role they can play in the solution. We're so thankful for their contributions to this campaign. And in particular, we want to thank the program led by the Village of Arts and Humanities and Human Nature and their fantastic strategic design fellows, Naima Gadsden, Craig Terry Jr., and Benjamin Spence Jr. for their creative contributions. This campaign aims to address gun violence and support those communities and their leaders working together for peace and justice. Gun violence is a public health problem, and it's deserving of public health solutions. It's driven by social determinants of health and structural racism, and it has profound effects on the health of communities. Addressing these big issues is the most necessary work to reduce violence in our communities, but the contributions of each community member are not without value. An engaged community can make a difference addressing gun violence in Philadelphia, and we hope this campaign provides not just helpful information, but a word of hope. We can work together to end gun violence in our community, and we will. We want to empower and support activists and community leaders to make the changes in their neighborhoods that they believe will make sense to build community. The campaign links to several resources for addressing and combating violence in our city, and we hope to continue to grow this resource list over time. Thank you. And next, I'll hand it to Erica Atwood.
Thank you, Dr. Baya. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to take a moment to echo the mayor's sentiments of not only empathy, but frustration that yet again, we are here in the wake of a community being devastatedly impacted by senseless gun violence. We continue to work relentlessly and diligently to make our communities safe, healthy, and hopeful. And I am privileged enough today to have the honor to introduce and announce a new partnership between the City of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Housing Authority that expands support for people who are at a high risk or highly at risk of engaging in gun violence. While we are balancing what happened to what is in the future, this program program focuses on areas most impacted by gun violence and is a critical new strategy to support our ongoing implementation to the roadmap to safer communities. Again, this is really about stronger and authentic community engagement, better coordinated resources and services, so we can have safe and healthy communities. We have an opportunity to meet those that are at risk where they are, and to get them the help they need to have an actual opportunity to a different path. This program is jointly funded by the city and PHA and leverages the strong relationship that the resident advisory board has built over the years with PHA residents to help to connect those that can often be tough to reach. I'm extremely and eternally grateful for the Philadelphia Housing Authority and the resident advisory board for their leadership and their continued partnership on this critical issue. And with that, I'm honored to introduce Kelvin Jeremiah, President and CEO of PHA, to share more about our program. Kelvin, you're on mute.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to take this opportunity to again echo Erica's and the mayor's sentiments, and to thank the mayor for recognizing that one organization alone cannot stop the violence, that it would take public-private partners collaborating with those on the ground in the community to make a meaningful and impactful effort to stop the violence we're experiencing across the city and in our neighborhoods. PHA has partnered with the Resident Advisory Board, also known as the RAB, which is an organization within PHA made up of resident leaders who are elected by residents from across our developments to represent residents' interests, with the goal of connecting with young men 18 to 34 living in PHA developments and who are at risk of engaging in or being impacted by gun violence. Our objective is to provide them with social services support and resources, including connecting them and providing them with mentoring, job training, and other training opportunities. Like the city, PHA is supporting these efforts by also contributing $250,000 for a total commitment of $500,000 towards this initiative. For those who do not know, the RAB is uniquely positioned to take a strategic and impactful role in preventing and curbing violence at or around PHA developments, because among other things, they are resident leaders that are elected by residents at the sites to represent residents who work with PHA in addressing issues and ensuring the right services and opportunities are being provided, along with obviously self-sufficiency programs that PHA provides. They reside at the developments and often have keen insights into what is happening at the developments. And residents, frankly, are the ones most impacted by the violence, and thus they have a unique interest in addressing it. We need their partnership because we cannot solve this intractable issue alone. And so I want to commend Erica, the mayor, Tumor Alexander, and the city team, as well as PHA's team, for working collaboratively to get this program implemented, and equally importantly, funding it. With that, I want to introduce PHA's partner, the RAB's president, Asia Coney, to explain the program. I want to also take this opportunity to publicly thank her for all the work she has done surrounding this anti-violence initiative. Her experience, her actual experience around this, I know is personal to her, and she is someone who I think will run this program along with the RAB and get the kind of results from the ground that I think we're all looking for. So with that, please let me introduce to all of you President of the RAB, Asia Coney. Asia?
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by first of all thanking the Philadelphia Housing Authority and the City of Philadelphia and all of the parties that have been involved in making this wonderful outreach effort and an effort to help to cut back on some of the violence that we are personally experiencing. We are so thankful to be able to work with two other individuals who will be other organizations that we will be contracting with, which is AMIR, Every Murder is Remembered, and the Father's Day Rally Committee. Between the three of us, we have over 102 years of collectively working to advocate and provide support and services to individuals, families, and communities. So we know, and I know, that we are more than capable of getting the job done. We are targeting, we are reaching out to over 435 young men within the ages of 18 to 34 who reside at, and I don't think anybody mentioned it, but let me mention the sites that will be involved in this process. We have Bartram Village in Southwest Philadelphia, Wilson Park in South Philadelphia. We have Strawberry Mansion Apartments and Gordon Apartments in North Philadelphia, along with Raymond Rosen and Richard Allen. We have met with leadership and residents at all of the sites, have gotten a commitment from all of them to work closely with us in the recruitment and making sure that as we come to their sites and their locations twice a week, providing social service, outreach, counseling, and mentoring, that they will be partners with us with boots on the ground. We are currently engaged in an outreach where we are doing a direct mailing to young males, individuals of the age group, which total 435 possible candidates. And we have done a deep dive because we're looking at servicing the 150. And make no mistake, if we get 160, 170, we will find a way to service those individuals. Part of the activities are workshops that will be conducted by AMIR that deal with tragedy and trauma. We often talk about the violence, but we need to get deeper into how it is affecting individuals. Often we don't realize that there are residual trauma that exists that cause many of our young folks to be on edge and to react in very negative and violent manners. We are counting on the Father's Day Rally Committee, which they do very well, and mentoring these young men and getting them to think about how violence affects them in the community and being able to show them that there are other ways to deal with violence. We also want to make sure that they are provided with life skills, where they can start looking at careers and understand that life is just not always in the street. So with the help of the Housing Authority and the Resident Programs and Partnerships Division, we will be aligning them up with various job training programs. We have a brand new entrepreneur program that is working very well for those that have that desire. We are truly looking to ensure that they understand better life skills and how do you solve conflict and how it is not always at the hand of a weapon or the use of a weapon. We want to take it a step further and begin to talk to the heads of households where these young men reside and to provide them with skills to help them ensure that their homes are free and safe from weapons of destruction. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach on that level. We are bringing in various presenters, and we truly intend to work with the PHA PD and the city PD, because there's got to be a relationship between the various police departments and our young folks. It cannot continue to be of adversary nature, but we clearly want to be able to say to our young folks that there are folks that care about them, that want to help them succeed, and want to help them be able to deal with the social ills they are experiencing. And again, I want to thank the Philadelphia Housing Authority, the City of Philadelphia, the Managing Directors Department, and others for this opportunity to get deep into our developments and provide another opportunity to help our children not be statistics. Thank you. And I will stick around for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cooney, and thank you, Calvin Jeremiah. With that, I will pass it to Commissioner Outlaw and the members of Police Department leadership.
Thank you, Erica. Good afternoon. Before I begin, I too want to acknowledge the collective grief from what we're all experiencing here in the nation, and also the emotions that we're, quite frankly, all experiencing here in our own communities locally, whether it's internally here in the police department or our external communities. You know, the mass killings that occurred in Buffalo on May 14th and then yesterday at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, have left each and every one of us reeling over the senseless loss of lives and the hatred that some harbor in their hearts. It leaves us wondering when this unrelenting suffering will end. We also extend our deepest condolences to the victims, their families, and communities that all of these incidents have touched. This isn't normal. It's not okay. And we refuse to accept this as our norms. The number of people who've lost their lives in this city is not and will not ever be normal, never. We as human beings have the right to go to the store, to a mall, to movie theaters, and quite frankly, just to be free of fear wherever we go. And as parents should be comforted when sending their children to school, making sure their children are provided with the tools they need to be successful future leaders. We shouldn't be racked with worry over our children's safety or even have to live in a world where we're wondering whether someone brought a weapon to school. Locally, we've experienced several disturbing incidents over the last few days, including a triple shooting outside of one of our schools just this week, and another shooting that took place involving 2 groups of juveniles. In light of these incidents, we've increased our patrols around schools and other areas where large groups congregate. And in addition to school police and Philadelphia Police School Beat presence at schools, patrol officers will be making area checks around schools to make sure that everyone is safe. I want to assure the public that we're using every resource available to us to ensure that our students finish off the school year safely and that everyone across the city can enjoy our warmer weather as safely as possible. Ahead of the Memorial Day weekend, we will be increasing our patrols throughout the city. Officers will be conducting more security checks in our business corridors and patrolling hotspots throughout Philadelphia. And then as we head into June, which happens to be Gun Violence Awareness Month, I want to draw some quick attention to some of the resources available to victims of gun violence through the Philadelphia Police Department. I encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about victim services to visit our website at phillypolice.com and then click on the Programs and Services tab. And then from there, the Victim and Assistance Programs tab. There you will find information on victim services programs as well as domestic violence information, in addition to contact information for units within the PPD that can directly assist you with your questions. We also provide contact information for various supporting government and community agencies. And then one last thing, before I turn this over to Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales and then Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, as I usually do, I want to remind our community members who are interested in becoming police officers that our application period closes this Friday, the 27th, Friday, May 27th. Our community needs more officers, but we need the right people with the right mindset in these positions. So we're looking for people with a lot of skills, a wide range of skill sets. And you never know, if you're listening today, you might be the right fit. Be the difference in your community during its time of need. So please go to our website at www.joinphillypd.com or call 215-683-COPS, 215-683-COPS or 2677 to speak to a recruiter. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales now, and he's going to give us some updates on what we've been seeing in our pinpoint grids. Joe?
All right, thanks, boss. Next slide. Okay, I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date as of May 22nd, Philadelphia had 186 homicides and 833 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are down 7%, 186 this year versus 201 last year, and shooting victims are up 3%, 833 this year versus 807 last year. As of yesterday, homicides are down 9% and shooting victims remain at 3%. Looking at the bottom left of the chart, again, the motives remain the same for the homicides, arguments, drugs, and domestics. And also, too, want to make note that the clearance rate is now at 48%. Next slide, please. Okay, in this line graph, the blue line represents homicides and the orange line represents shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. If you look at the right side of the graph, you'll see that as of May 22nd, homicides are down 1% in the pinpoint grids and shooting victims are down 8%, which is a slight increase when comparing last week's 2022 year-to-date totals with 2021. Next slide, please. As of 5/23 of this year, 2,291 crime guns were seized in our city. Next slide. And lastly, in reference to the privately made firearms, also known as ghost guns, that were seized in our city year to date, as of 5/23, we are now at 211. And with that, I will now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight. Ben?
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I will, as usual, be providing homicide arrest updates, as I've been doing during these press conferences. And since our last press conference, police have arrested 10 individuals who are wanted for committing homicides. After that, I'm going to be featuring an individual that's wanted for a homicide, and finally, I'll be highlighting several recent carjacking arrests. I'm going to start with an incident in this update that occurred in 2020. And the first arrest photo is of Ramonte Foster. And on May 23rd, 18-year-old Ramonte Foster was arrested for the homicide of 27-year-old Shakira McCautry. The incident occurred on November the 10th of 2020 on the 1300 block of West Wishart Street. This case was originally cleared with the arrest of 21-year-old Paul Forsyth on May 5th of 2021. Next is an arrest photo of Jarvay Scott and a wanted photo of Earl Hassan. And on May 23rd, 38-year-old Jarvay Scott was arrested for the homicide of 33-year-old Troy Berry. The incident occurred on September the 30th of 2021, and I previously featured Mr. Scott along with Mr. Hassan, both as wanted fugitives during a press conference on January the 5th of this year. Earl Hassan is still actively wanted for this murder. Next is Khalil Tyree. On May 10th, 29-year-old Khalil Tyree was arrested for the homicide of 41-year-old Eric Lockie. The incident occurred on January the 6th on the 800 block of Scattergood Street in Frankfurt. Next is an arrest photo of Xavier Lopez. And on May 10th, 26-year-old Xavier Lopez was arrested for the homicide of 31-year-old Javier Silva. And I previously featured Mr. Lopez as a wanted fugitive during the press conference on March the 2nd. The incident occurred on February the 8th on the 2400 block of North Reese Street. Next is Salim Ralph and Jameer Rice. And on May 11th, 18-year-old Salim Ralph was arrested. And on May 12th, Jameer Rice was arrested. They were each arrested for the murder of 22-year-old Kelvin Sori. That incident occurred on March the 8th on the 1900 block of North 32nd Street. Next is Devon Little. And on May 10th, on May 10th, 32-year-old Devon Little was arrested for the murder of 33-year-old Ana Vega and another shooting victim who survived the incident. That incident occurred on April the 14th on the 4900 block of Whitaker Avenue. Next is Tyree Sini. On May 10th, 41-year-old Tyree Sini was arrested for the shooting murder of 37-year-old Fiores Rivera. The incident occurred on May the 9th on the 3100 block of West Mont Street. Next is Tahir Moore. On May 13th, 44-year-old Tahir Moore was arrested for the murder of 36-year-old Sherry Turner, who was the mother of his child. The incident occurred on May 8th on the 900 block of West Gerard Street. This incident garnered a lot of media attention as it was a very tragic event. Next is an arrest photo of Malik Ra. And on May 13th, 51-year-old Malik Ra, also known as Lewis McCall, was arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, 41-year-old Reagan Donnelly. The incident occurred on May 13th on the 1700 block of Edwin Walk. Next, I'm going to be featuring a male that's wanted as a fugitive. And this is a slide of Kevin McKnight. 33-year-old Kevin McKnight is wanted for the murder of 31-year-old Michael Thomas. The incident occurred on May 17th on the 5400 block of Media Street. The arrest warrant was obtained on the same day as the homicide. And if anyone has any information pertaining to any fugitives, suspects' whereabouts, please call our homicide unit at 215-686-3334, or they can always call our tip line. It's easy to remember. It's 215-686-TIPS. That's 215-686-8477. Next, I'm going to speak about some carjacking arrests. I'm going to start with an incident that occurred from 1700 Lambert Street. And on May 12th, 19-year-old Kahim Williams was arrested on 2000 Judson Street for a carjacking point of gun that occurred on May 11th on the 1700 block of Lambert Street. Next is an incident from 1100 Kerper Street. And on May 12th, 18-year-old Marquise Andrews was arrested at F Street and Roosevelt Boulevard for a carjacking that occurred just 1 hour prior on the 1100 block of Kerper Street. Next, from 6700 Geyer, and on May 18th, 30-year-old Tyleek Hines was arrested on 1500 Carlisle Street for a point of gun carjacking that occurred an hour prior on the 6700 block of Geyer Avenue. Next is 100 block of North 15th Street. And finally, on May 22nd, 29-year-old Michael McFadden Boyer, as well as 22-year-old Assad Brown, were arrested after police attempted to stop them while operating a stolen vehicle. The offenders fled from police. They struck a juvenile that was riding a bicycle, injuring him, and then crashed into several parked cars before abandoning the stolen vehicle and fleeing on foot. The officers pursued the offenders and they apprehended them shortly after the incident. Also recovered from one of the offenders' path of travel was a fanny pack that contained a BB gun, which had been discarded in a trash can. The stolen vehicle the offenders were operating had been taken in a carjacking earlier in the morning around 1:45 a.m. on May 22nd on the 100 block of North 15th Street. One of the offenders was positively identified by the carjacking complainant as the male who pointed the gun at him and drove away in the vehicle. And finally, one more to finish up with. From 1900 Woodstock on May 23rd, 22-year-old Thomas Poland was extradited from North Carolina after being arrested on a warrant from Philadelphia for a carjacking that he allegedly committed on December 31st of 2021 on the 1900 block of Woodstock Street. And that warrant was obtained a few months back on March 18th. And with that, I will turn it back to Kevin from the mayor's office. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to all of our speakers. We will now move to Q&A for members of the press. And because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions, and reporters are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer today, given the time. Armando is available for Spanish interpretation as needed. If you would like to ask a question, just please use the raise your hand function and we'll go down the list. Also a reminder today, Kelvin Jeremiah from the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Housing Authority is joining us, as well as Asia Coney, the chair of the PHA Resident Advisory Board, and they can answer questions on the new partnership between the city and PHA. And so with that, we'll go to our first reporter, Kristen Johansson, KYW. Kristen?
Hey there. My first question is for the commissioner. Commissioner, do you have any response or reaction to the executive order that's going to be signed by President Biden?
I do actually, and fortunately, I was one of the small group of my colleagues through Major City Chiefs that had the opportunity to provide some feedback and input into the executive order, which they actually took to heart and incorporated. I think the administration is showing that public safety and the need for accountability aren't mutually exclusive, that achieving the balance of both can be very complex, but also recognizing that both are equally important. So, a lot of the bullet points within the executive order itself, applies to federal law enforcement, but we know that we work very closely with federal law enforcement, and we tend to look to our federal partners as, for either model policies or model performance. So I would just say that I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this, the focus on officer wellness, and ultimately just acknowledging that when you achieve accountability, we're improving the trust between our relationships, and therefore we're able to get ahead of the violent crime that we've been seeing because of the trusting relationships that we're building.
Are there any specifics? This is kind of going still to part one, or to question one. Were there any specific things that maybe you recommended or spoke about in this smaller kind of committee that they're adopting?
I will tell you this. I mean, I'm part of an organization, so I don't speak as an individual on this, but we all stressed, and I personally stressed, the importance of acknowledging that there has to be both. These things have to happen simultaneously, and we still in law enforcement need to be able to do our jobs without either being restrained, and I don't mean that in the literal sense, but also being forced to do things without the funds to do it. That's also something that's critically important. So again, the feedback, their willingness, the administration's willingness to be open to that and be willing to listen to the leadership of a lot of the police departments in this country, I think is very telling. And I'm just looking forward again, in the future for other challenging and complex issues like this, for more collaboration around topics like this.
And I don't know if this is for you or Deputy Commissioner Nash, but could you please run down how one puts in money for the $20,000 reward for a homicide investigation?
DC
Like
Nash,
what the vetting process is?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Commissioner. It starts with the information that's received being checked out, and if it is in fact information that is critical in the investigation that leads to an arrest and a conviction, is dependent upon a conviction, so it won't be awarded until after that point. The investigative supervisor, the investigator, they will collaborate and provide their information up the chain, and it will go through a review process, and ultimately we will analyze it and make sure that it's appropriate, that the contribution was sufficient and critical, and that it helped to lead to that arrest and conviction in a homicide. And then it goes through to be signed off and be paid out through the managing director's office as part of the mayor's reward process.
Okay, thanks. That's my two questions. And just want to renew my hope that we can do these in person someday soon, Mayor. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kristen. We'll now go to Mensa Dean of the Inquirer. Mensa.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have two questions. The first is concerning carjackings, and the second one is concerning justifiable shootings. Concerning carjackings, I guess Deputy Commissioner Nash, this one could be for you. You recently given us numbers concerning carjackers and their ages. Can you provide us with a breakdown of the year-to-date number of arrests for carjackings and breakdown by age range? Those who are under the age of 18, and those who are 18 to 19, and older?
Sure. As of this point, we have a total of 179 individuals that have been arrested for carjacking. That includes 158 males, and there are 21 females that have been arrested. And regarding the ages, 54 of the arrests have been of juveniles, that's 17 or younger, and 125 are adults. I can tell you that the break of under 15 or under is a total of 17 people have been 13 to 15 years old in that group of people that have been arrested for carjacking.
Okay, and finally on carjackings, how many incidents of carjackings have there been year to date?
At this time, we have 546 completed or attempted carjacking incidents in the city.
Do you happen to have the corresponding number for this time last year?
I don't have the corresponding at this time for last year. I can tell you last year, we were counting a total of 847. So we are ahead of last year's pace, unfortunately. And we had been seeing a decline. Our numbers were down into the teens on a weekly basis. They've been skewing back up recently. And we continue to put a significant amount of effort into with all of our investigative partners into identifying the individuals that are responsible for these. And we continue to make arrests and make sure that they're being prosecuted and as best as possible kept off the street so they can't reoffend.
Thank you. Finally, concerning justifiable homicides, I received some numbers from the department that stated that shootings, homicides in which the shooter was deemed justified by self-defense are up substantially. From 2020 there were 12, and in 2021 there were 19, and as of this year there's the numbers could be anywhere from 8 to 11. Still trying to verify that. So my question is, what, you know, those are some significant jumps. I think it's like 37% from 20 to 21. What do you attribute? Do you see this as a you know a trend? And what do you think is behind the increased number, the uptick in people you know using their legal guns in self-defense and killing people?
Well, let me start by saying it's not a secret that the proliferation of guns everywhere across the country, and especially in the city, means that there's more guns on the street. We have seen an increase in the number of people that have been applying for and receiving a permit to carry. So there are more legally permitted gun carrying individuals in the city. And I think that there are people that are concerned about their safety and they're carrying it legally, which is the big difference. But we've also seen an increase in the number of shootings in the last few years. So what goes along with that is that there's more people who are carrying a gun, and whether it's legally or illegally, if they're being fired upon, they may be justified, and they would be likely justified on returning fire and preventing death to them or somebody else. So I think you have to look at that as a factor with the increased level of overall violence that our city has been experiencing, unfortunately, as well as across the country. So although I don't have the numbers to back up to be specific regarding your questions, and we'll get that, and I'll get it through our public affairs, you know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably up throughout the country in terms of justifiable homicides with people that are fighting back and are taking defensive action when confronted with somebody who would cause them harm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mensa. We'll now go to Miguel Martinez of Univision. Miguel?
Hello, good afternoon. My first question is for Commissioner Outlaw in regards to the ATV and dirt bikes use. Speaking with some North Philly residents, they told us that this is a big issue, that this is a big concern. Just last week, we saw 2 people died in relation to these activities of ATVs used in their bikes. So what are some of the initiatives that the city is trying to do or is currently doing to combat this issue?
Thank you for that question. You know, the issue of ATVs and dirt bikes isn't new to us. Obviously, it's an issue that we see more when the weather gets warmer. As we go into the Memorial Day weekend, we do anticipate having officers assigned specifically to be out there for that, and then making sure that we have ATV details in place throughout the summer. I just want to remind everyone, however, that we're utilizing resources that typically we would be using in other areas to address either violent crime or non-fatal shootings. Of course, this is just as important, but we're doing what we can with the resources that we have. DC Dales, you want to jump in and talk a little bit more about the ATVs in the event that I've missed something?
Oh, you pretty much covered it all, boss. We're going to continue to focus on the issue, starting this weekend, of course. We can't stress it enough that the resources are coming from a short staff, but we're going to try to be consistent as much as possible moving forward to run the detail.
La pregunta que nos hace Miguel es que hablando con algunos residentes del norte de Filadelfia nos hablaron de un problema que les preocupa mucho, que es las personas que están manejando vehículos todoterreno y motocross que no están siendo reguladas peligrosamente por las calles de la ciudad de Filadelfia, y qué iniciativas tienen al respecto los oficiales de policía. La comisionada Outlaw nos agradece por la pregunta y nos dice que los vehículos de todoterreno y estas motocicletas se ven más con el clima más cálido y se espera que suba más su actividad. Sin embargo, para el fin de semana de Memorial Day o el fin de semana de Remembranza, se van a asignar mayores números de oficiales y en mayor detalle los policías que van a utilizar estos recursos, pero que se utilizarían en otras áreas, van a ser redesignados para cubrir estas áreas donde se dan estos problemas en el norte de la ciudad. Para luchar contra este problema, el oficial Dale nos dice que seguimos enfocados en este tema y que se van a designar mayores recursos para este problema esta semana. Gracias.
Gracias, Armando. And my second question is for Mayor Kenny. Mayor, it has been almost 2 months since the implementation of the 211 Violence Prevention Hotline. Can you give us an update? How is the program going? Has it been a success?
I don't have the figures in front of me, but Eric Atwood is under her bailiwick. So.
Yeah, good afternoon. I will say it's really too early to tell. We've only been up for a few months. We are really figuring out kind of what folks are asking for, what they're needing. We're really in the launch phase. We should be able to have some substantial reports after about 6 months of operation.
La pregunta que nos hace Miguel tiene que ver con el programa de prevención de la violencia de la línea 211 y pide una actualización sobre los resultados de este programa. El alcalde nos dice que es un poco temprano para tener cifras que nos den un resultado de la efectividad de este programa o su eficacia. Y la comisionada Atwood agrega que efectivamente es muy temprano. Este programa ha sido operativo solamente por unos cuantos meses y estamos todavía tratando de determinar cuáles son las necesidades y cuáles son los deseos de los residentes en cuanto a esto. Y creemos que después de unos 6 meses de operatividad se podrá tener resultados e información que compartir. Gracias.
Thanks, Armando. Thanks, Miguel. We'll now go to Yaima Crespo of Telemundo.
Sí, hola. Armando, la pregunta es para el alcalde Jim Kenney. Sobre la situación que ha ocurrido obviamente en Texas. Mucha gente está preocupada y el alcalde ha dicho en numerosas ocasiones que se necesita que la ciudad tenga más autonomía en cuanto a sus leyes. ¿Qué esfuerzos se están realizando en términos de esto para que la ciudad pueda tener más control?
The question is for Mayor Kenny. Mayor Kenny, this is in regards to the sad situation that's been taking place in Texas. Obviously, people are concerned about it. And you've mentioned before that the city ought to have greater flexibility and autonomy in regards to its laws. What efforts are being made, if any, in this regard?
We're currently involved in a lawsuit which has not been resolved yet. We'll continue to work with our legislative leaders to see if we can get some assistance. I mean, the things that we're asking for are not, shouldn't be controversial. You should not be able to buy a gun for a felon, turn the gun over to the felon, and then not have to be responsible for the actions that person uses in using that gun. That seems to me a pretty simple thing to do. I would hope that actually, since Senator Toomey is retiring, that maybe he would do us a solid on the way out the door and maybe vote for background checks. That would be another helpful opportunity. We're continuing to use every manner that we can, the courts, legislative process. New York has its own ability to control guns. New York State has stricter laws than Pennsylvania for sure. New Jersey, around, another neighbor of ours, has extremely difficult ways to get a gun, and we need help. And as I said earlier in my comments, Second Amendment was not written for AR-15s. It's written for a simple long gun used to defend your country, not to take out revenge on people and to hijack and to carjack cars.
La pregunta que se le hace al alcalde es obviamente con relación al problema terrible que se ha vivido en Texas, y la respuesta que nos da el alcalde es que actualmente tenemos una demanda judicial que está en trámite y no se ha resuelto todavía, y estamos en contacto con nuestros líderes legislativos para proporcionar ayuda a la ciudad de Filadelfia. Esto no es ningún tema que deba ser controversial. Sencillamente no debe ser posible que alguien compre un arma de fuego para divertirse y se la pase a algún convicto que luego pueda darle un uso nefario a esta arma de fuego. Es algo muy sencillo que hay que hacer, y ya que se retira una camada de líderes legislativos, esperamos que nos puedan ayudar, la gente nueva que venga, para hacer al menos un registro de antecedentes previo a la compra de un arma de fuego, y se utilice todo el recurso que se pueda utilizar para proporcionar un marco de apoyo legislativo para resolver este problema. Nueva York tiene leyes de control para el uso de armas en su estado, lo mismo en New Jersey, que hace muy difícil que cualquier persona pueda obtener un arma de fuego, y nosotros lo que necesitamos es ayuda, y necesitamos entender que la segunda enmienda fue creada para proteger o cubrir a la nación con un arma de fuego sola, y no para los AR-15 que pueden matar a mucha gente y que no deben utilizarse para lograr venganza o propósitos no diseñados. Muchas gracias.
Es todo para mí. That's all. Thank you, Armando. Thank you, Mayor Kenny.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. We'll now go to Jack Tomzik of Metro. Jack.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Outlaw, is there any indication as to the cause of the crash that killed the off-duty police officer, Thomas Muns?
This happened yesterday. It's still under investigation. Quite frankly, we're all still processing. A lot of folks here are grieving. And I'll just leave that there. I mean, it's a lot going on right now. We've lost a lot of off-duty officers who were active in addition to Officer Muns. And like I said, we look forward to an expeditious investigation. But this is a time that, as a community, all of us are collectively in mourning.
A lot of the, coverage about this has been, the fact that he was involved in the Walter Wallace Jr. shooting, and along with another officer, Sean Matarazzo. Was the internal investigation, what were the results of the police department's investigation into that shooting?
That was a justifiable shooting. We said very early on that there were some process gaps that we identified and we could quickly address with timely communication, what's being communicated to our radio, making sure now moving forward that our dispatchers have a mental health script. So they're asking questions to prompt as much information as possible. Again, the co-responder model was rolled out. There were a lot of things that came out of that were either, already underway, but we got additional funding in order to strengthen our response to someone in crisis. But, that happened some time ago. That I believe the district attorney's office, though, has not yet made a decision on that, on whether or not there will be criminal charges, but the case is done on this end administratively.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. And given that we're almost at time, we'll give Mensa Dean, I see your hand up. Do you have one more question?
Yes, I just have one more question. Hate to go back over this issue on carjackings, Deputy Commissioner Nash. You gave me a lot of numbers. There's just one that that I just want to nail down because you spoke about this in one of the previous meetings. We're looking for the number of those carjackers who've been arrested for carjacking, I should say, who are age 20 and under.
Okay, so I have 54 juveniles have been arrested so far, and an additional 59 individual, an additional 59 are 18 to 20. So it's 59 plus the 54. So it is 113.
All right. That's my last question on carjackers. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Mensa. And seeing no other hands raised, that's going to conclude today's press briefing. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good day.